Hello and welcome back to my channel, and as you can tell from the title, it's time for another industry chat, and today's guest is Luke Stopforth, who is currently the head of data and technology at Premier League club Brentford. So I'm really excited about this chat. Luke has kind of shown the progression that you can have as an analyst. So, started off, I believe, at sort of in an academy setting, worked his way up to first team analyst, then head of analysis, and now he's in the current role that he is at the moment, as I say, head of data and technology. So Brentford are known for some great kind of tactics, and the way they do things in terms of stats and all that sort of stuff is very, very interesting. So I'm going to, really delve into that with Luke today and see what kind of ideas he's got, what he thinks about the progression and kind of what's next for him, and just kind of have a general chat about analysis at the Premier League level, really. So without further ado, let's get into the chat with Luke. Okay, good afternoon, Luke. How are you doing today, mate? You doing okay?
Yeah, good, Chris. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Luke. And again, I appreciate you jumping on. So, as I say, there's lots to kind of talk about. You've been at your current club, Brentford, for a long time, which we will come into, and that's kind of spanned obviously lots of different managers, different leagues, and different experiences from your perspective. So, just really, I did a little introduction on who you were before you joined, Luke. But again, what I'd like to do is just pass that over to you. So, for those that don't know you, Luke, so who are you, and what are you kind of currently doing at the moment?
Yeah, so Luke Stopforth, working at Brentford Football Club. As you say, been here a long time now. So just coming into my 12th season now. And yeah, current role is head of data and technology. So working across the football departments at the club. And that's sort of split out across two facets, really. So there's the data piece where it's using the data that's available to us to drive bespoke projects that can help improve the players on the pitch and improve that performance. And then there's the technology piece where it's around understanding the football department's processes, and seeing whether there's any sort of tech on the market that can fill any spaces within those processes that can lead to more streamlined decision making, and obviously with that aim of improving performance on the pitch. And then also like looking at the innovation in the tech market as well. So the interest in people and companies that are trying to get into the football space with their new technologies.
Yeah, definitely. So that role you've kind of obviously described that you're in at the moment, that probably didn't exist at the club several years ago. Obviously, as things have changed, the landscape of software, data, and everything, and obviously as the club has gone up the leagues effectively, that's kind of created that position for you. And it's interesting because other analysts that I've spoke to, one topic that does come up is the progression of an analyst. So which will come to your early days in terms of doing bits at the uni team, and then maybe a bit of academy analysis, then the actual role of the analyst. Then I think you went to sort of head of the department in terms of analysis, and now you're in the current one. So it's just curious to see, some analysts will, when they've kind of the time's up almost, it's a hard working, it's a young man's game, effectively, a lot of traveling and stuff. Some kind of venture off to the recruitment side. It's interesting to see what you've done in terms of that, and you're heading up that now and kind of just looking at ways to improve the club as a whole, really. So it's really, really interesting. So what we will do, Luke, if it's okay, we'll kind of flick it back to the early days, really. I'm just curious to kind of understand where analysis came from for you. Like what introduced you to it? You obviously did your undergrad degree, you've done a master's degree. So did you touch upon analysis with your undergrad degree as well, Luke?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Chichester, so sport and exercise science. And yeah, like you say, I think it was the last year there we had a performance analysis module, and it was then when I started pretty much the same as what's happening now. So there's a lot of modules around now where it requires you to do some work experience, and that's what I did. So managed to get in at Crystal Palace with their under 18s at the time. That Nathaniel Klein was in there. Some other players that have gone on to make it, and that's where really enjoyed the analysis aspect of things and how you could improve player performance and having an influence there. So that's where it really sparked my interest in that last year, my undergraduate. And then, like you say, went on to UWIC, do my masters, and then straight out of there got the role at Brentford.
Yeah, brilliant. So, and again, that's another thing that I talk about to kind of students now is kind of just take an experience where you can get it. So you obviously, when you were at uni, you worked with the university football team, was it?
Yeah.
So again, like what can you say that you learned from that, and was that beneficial, Luke, at that stage in your career?
Yeah, it definitely was. So yeah, like you say, that was with Ewick, so working with the men's first team there, and it was they actually, from memory, we're going back a long time now. They actually didn't have any sort of analysis set up with the football team at the time, so it was basically blank piece of paper for me. It was, here you go create a relationship with the manager, head coach, and see what he wants, and go and shape and drive some analysis for the football team that can be carried on for years to come. So yeah, that was a real steep learning curve for me to almost learn straight off the bat that, yeah, I didn't have anybody sort of guiding me. I had to fend for myself and really learn on the job, really.
Yeah, valuable skills. And I think for those listening, I think something like that is very useful. You don't have to get an internship or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's a top club or a university team. If you can get in, used to doing analysis, presenting it to players, coaches, having them relations, because a lot of it is in analysis to do with relationships and things like that. So that's, valuable for you to be able to get that early on in your career. So from there, you went to Palace then, Luke. Was that academy then, you say, the academy analysis?
Yeah, with the 18. So it was literally just traveling up to the training ground once a week, pretty much on a Monday or a Tuesday, I think it was, just to sort of do a debrief. So I'd watch the game back from the weekend that had been filmed by somebody else.
Yeah.
Again, like you touched on already, building that relationship with the manager, getting to understand what he was looking for through the matches, and yeah, trying to pull that out and feed that back to the staff and players.
Yeah, and just, did you play when you were younger, Luke? Did you play? Did you coach? Any of that?
Yeah, so played, got to about semi-professional level. So yeah, played Eastleigh, Winchester, teams like that on the South Coast, and then during that time, I was also going back and forth to America and coaching out there. So yeah, again, wide range of kids, sort of male, female, 4-year-olds, where you're almost doing the babysitting, and then up to where we were sort of coaching some college teams and doing some higher level stuff in the fall season out there as well. So yeah, sort of a wide range of understanding of the game, playing, coaching, analysis as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's get to Brentford then. So Brentford is what? Well, I'm just looking at your profile as well. So I've got sort of June 2011. You were a first team analyst at Brentford. So did you go straight to the first team, or did you do a little bit with the younger ones there as well?
Yeah. So the first role was that 2011. Yeah, sounds about right. Was like a split role with the 18s and development squad, and then also I chipped in with the academy as well, because I know I went to the Milk Cup that year with the 16s when Brentford won it as well. So yeah, it was a small department at the time, and it was pretty much all hands on deck, help out where you can. So yeah, did 1 year of that, and then yeah, Neil McAlargy, who was heading up the department at the time, took me up to the first team, and yeah, that's where I was since then.
And what league were Brentford then? Can you remember what?
Yeah, League One.
League One.
Uwe Rosler was the manager.
Yeah. Okay, cool. long way from there now. So okay, so yeah, so you obviously still at Brentford now, so you've been there basically more than a decade. So I'm just curious then, we'll kind of go through the steps and how your career or your job role has developed at Brentford then. So you've obviously spent, let's see, so kind of 4 or so years as first team analyst. So you did touch upon it a second ago, Luke. So how the department's changed. So you said when you it was bare bones when you joined, fair to say. So what does that department look like now? I know you're kind of you're not the first team analyst anymore, but what does the analysis department kind of look like at Brentford at the moment?
Yeah, so I think if we go back to when I first joined, and like I say, it was a small department, and then it very quickly grew throughout the academy that we had at the time as well. And I know you want to ask me about that in a little bit, but yeah, so we had an outstanding team of analysts, to be honest with you, and a lot of them now are at clubs in the Premier League. They're working at international level, so we had a real good crop of analysts that gone on to form really strong careers for themselves. And then so that obviously the academy closed, and then we had to cut right back again. And now we're at the stage now where we're starting to open up an academy again. So we're sort of in terms of what the analysis department looks like now, we're actually in a bit of transition. And our B team analyst, Alfie Sparks, left us this week. He's gone and joined Forest Green Rovers in the first team there. So we're in a little bit of transition. I think we've got two job adverts out at the moment. But yeah, we've got Josh Kirk, who heads up the department, Joe Newton, who's first team analyst, Jack Wilson, who looks after the set pieces. So that's what we're at the moment. And then, yeah, like I say, we're looking to get another couple in.
Yeah, cool. No, very interesting. Because again, people will know, any football fans will know, Brentford kind of have a way of doing, there's lots of been said about the ownership, which we'll kind of come to in terms of the background of the owner and how that influences, the things that you do in terms of whether that be recruitment and obviously the different workflows day to day and stuff. So in terms of then, you've obviously spent your time doing the first team analysis. At that point, Luke, did you kind of think about progression in terms of, I want to kind of head this department up? Or were you ever thinking when you were doing the first team role in terms of what's next for me? Or did you get to a point where you're a little bit, I've kind of done what I can do with this, I want to kind of push on and do more? Like, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that's, for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think for me personally, I've always got that in the back of my mind anyway about like what is next, what is around the corner, and obviously you never know. And I think it's all around timing as well. So for me to step up from first team analyst to head up the department was completely out of my hands. So Neil McAlargy, like I said, who was heading up the department, left and joined Mark Warburton when he moved to Rangers. And obviously that space opened up. And I think that's what Brentford do really well as a club, is recruit from within. So yeah, of course I had to almost apply for the position, but yeah, I felt like I was in a strong place to put my strengths forward on that front.
Yeah. And then, so that was, I presume from your time, you obviously had the working relationship with it was the same kind of staff, and maybe you had people that kind of worked underneath you at that point. But how did that change then from now actually heading up the full department? So was it a bit of a shock for you? Were you kind of used to doing that kind of responsibilities? And what were you doing differently? Were you then managing budgets and managing staff, as well as obviously, the what I call boots on the ground and doing the analysis?
Yeah, no, I think I was still doing the analysis. But it was just probably a flip from post-match to opposition stuff, and formulating game plans for the next opponent rather than reflecting on what we did well and what we didn't do so well. But yeah, I definitely remember like a transition where it was, I'd been in the office with these guys for a few seasons, and then suddenly I'm responsible for them. I'm managing them. I've got to try and help shape their careers where I can. And I do remember feeling a bit of pressure on that front. But yeah, I think like the culture at the club and the environment that we got quickly helps with that, to be totally honest with you. And yeah, there's obviously, for me personally, there was a lot of added extra responsibility in terms of what you said there around budgets and bits and pieces like that. But yeah, I think you sink or swim, right? And you do what you can to crack on with it and do the best you can.
Yeah, definitely. So again, one thing you did kind of touch on very quickly there, Luke, was the academy. So again, probably people watching will already know that Brentford quite famously kind of closed their academy. I can't remember what year it was. What year was that?
That would have been, was it around 2016, I think?
So yeah, something around that. So they've closed the academy and kind of obviously now, is it reopened this season?
So we're going to go Cat 4 this season.
And then kind of okay. So just kind of going back to the actual closure, because I can remember when it was kind of done, it was obviously a big thing, like a professional club kind of just choosing to kind of not bother with the academy anymore. So can you kind of talk us through the reasons again? I think some of them are more obvious than others, but like the reasons around that and kind of how you feel that that's potentially maybe benefited Brentford kind of over the last sort of 10, 15 years or so.
Yeah, more than happy to give my view on that. If anybody wants some more detail, there's lots of really good content that Phil Giles put out around it as well. But yeah, I think there were a few main catalysts for the decision. One of them being the catchment area that we're in and the clubs that we were competing against. Yeah. It was hard to get good players in when you're competing with Arsenal, Chelsea, name every other London club around the area as well. Not to say that we weren't getting good players in, because players in the academy have gone on to make Premier League debuts, so there were good players in there. But there was almost like the idea that we wanted to flip that on its head, and everybody knows that in football, particularly at academy level, there's a lot of mistakes that are made around players that are deemed not necessarily good enough. So we wanted to almost flip that on the head and go, right, okay, well, we'll make use of the situations where other clubs have made mistakes on and release players too early, and we'll give them a second chance. So that was one of the main reasons. And then obviously there's the financial aspect, where you put in £2 million in a year, as has been reported, and you've got players in the academy that you want to offer contracts to, and they've been in your academy for X number of years, and suddenly they're not going to sign a deal with you, and they leave for compensation, whatever that may be. So I think that summer we lost two players that we wanted off contracts to. One went to Man United, one went to Man City. So it's like that pretty much nails the reasons that you were trying to close and move away from that system.
Yeah. So then so was it, in terms of like how in depth was the strip back? So obviously you had the B team, didn't you? When that was, so what kind of, you said you're kind of looking at players that, let's say Chelsea released, or well, basically anyone, like anyone that kind of was released from the other academies, you would be there to kind of take a look at, see if they'd kind of fit a job for you. So was that kind of just at certain age groups then, Luke? Because obviously you didn't have the full infrastructure of, like, was it just kind of released at sort of 17, 18-year-olds, that kind of age group?
Yeah. So it was, sort of 17 to 20, 21, I think it was, that we were really focusing on.
Yeah. Okay. So, so it was just, so that's, So in terms of the B team, then were you just playing friendlies, local friendlies, playing against, I suppose you could play in-house games and stuff like that. And obviously the other academy, were you still able to get games with the other academies then, Luke, at that stage? It was just like friendlies and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that was probably another positive at the time, was that we could offer these players a real diverse mixture of games. So we still were able to pick up games against academy sides. We were able to pick up games against men's teams, semi-professional, like lower league level. And we were also able to pick up games against European teams as well. And that still happened. Well, that still has been happening in the B team structure, around going and doing 4 games in Germany or a little mini tournament in Spain, and just giving the players a real variety of the games that they're playing in, rather than that just academy level constantly.
No, that's interesting. So I suppose what we'll kind of move on to then, Luke, is kind of the kind of ownership, if in terms of the club, and how that's kind of comes from a data-driven kind of background anyway, from the owner. So again, there's I'm not going to go into it too detailed, because there's lots of articles online in terms of, people can read that in their own time. So just to kind of sum it up really quickly, obviously, you've got Matt Benham, that's the kind of comes from a gambling background, and this actually resonated with me, Luke, obviously, because I was, like I said before, was at Brighton for a little while. Obviously, Tony Bloom, similar kind of background in terms of, it comes from that gambling background. So you've got Matt Benham there. He's obviously from what I read, he's a local kind of guy in terms of potentially a support of the club anyway. Helps them out when they're in a bit of financial trouble, and then obviously then he's the owner of the club, and he uses his knowledge of kind of algorithms and data and all that kind of thing to then benefit the club effectively. So what's the link between the club in Denmark, so Midtjylland? So it's kind of a lot reported that kind of a lot of the things that maybe you guys do at Brentford, Midtjylland is almost like the way to test things out, is what people, in the press and things were said. So in terms of that link, do you have anything to do with the guys at Midtjylland, or how does that work?
I mean, there's quite a few questions within that, but in terms of my link with FCM, I think it's probably quite limited, to be totally honest with you. I'd say that Smart Odds are probably the hub and the go-between for the two clubs. I speak to Soren, who's the head of analysis at FCM, semi-regularly, and that's like every couple of months, I'd say. But it's probably more that, Smart Odds are probably the central piece within those two clubs. And then, so it'll be something like, if FCM goes to Smart Odds with a request or a project or something like that, then Brentford will get eyes on that and see whether that's useful for us and whether it's something we want to bring into our process, and vice versa.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's probably not too much of a direct link between the two clubs. It more goes through Smart Odds.
Yeah. FCM is a lot. I'm gonna start saying that because I never know if I'm saying it right. So it's FCM from now. Perfect. So yeah, so a lot's been obviously said, like I say, about the data, but in terms of the recruitment as well, so kind of buying in players that are undervalued, cheaper than they should be, and obviously then selling on and making kind of, good money for the club. So again, before you join, I've kind of made a list, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list. So the likes of kind of Andre Gray, Watkins, Conser, Morpay, Ben Ra, like there's 100, well, there's probably over £100 million profit in them and many more. So I think, another club that kind of comes to mind is kind of Peterborough, in terms of they've done similar. They get the non-league players, and some of them maybe. Did you get one of them from Peterborough? I think.
Ivan, yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, yeah, he wouldn't have been sold yet, but
yeah, not sold yet. But if he was, I'm sure he's going to go for a lot more than what you paid for him. So, I think the whole aspect around that, in terms of kind of being self-sufficient and kind of finding undervalued assets, is a great way to go. So, have you had any kind of role to play in any of the recruitment, Luke, or is that kind of another department, other people, or have you actually been a part of that?
No, not me personally. Yeah, that's specific for the recruitment department. But yeah, I think the recruitment department and the analysis department probably use Smart Odds in a similar way, where it is around. I mean, as you probably would have experienced a little bit of Brighton, and as anybody would expect, you're leaning on that knowledge of a betting gambling company, their predictive modeling, to sort of bring that into some of your processes and workflows. So yeah, it's about creating team and individual ratings and bits and pieces like that. So yeah, I think recruitment and analysis lean on Smart Odds quite heavily, but yeah, not me personally involved in that recruitment space. I can't claim any of those players.
That was your chance. No one will have said anything. You could have said it was all you. So obviously getting to the Premier League then, which was playoff victory, was it? If I remember, playoff against
Swansea.
Yeah, I remember that. So yeah, so you made it to the big time in the Premier League. Obviously, I'm sure that was a great day and season for you and the rest of your colleagues and stuff. So, I mean, I'm just kind of, you're in there now. There's a lot's been said about kind of the style of play, which is obviously kind of very exciting style of play, and the set pieces as well. So one thing, and a previous guest on here was Andy, was a set piece coach. So I'm just kind of curious to see what you guys, do you have a dedicated set piece coach? Is that something that the analysts take a lot of kind of work on as well? So because again, it's something that you are quite known to being quite successful and utilizing set pieces very well.
Yeah. So as I touched on, Jack is responsible for the analysis of set pieces, and then it's more of a collective in the coaching department in terms of looking after the attacking and the defensive aspects of the set pieces. And as a collective, it's around formulating game plans in that specific area of the game.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then, and again, just for the benefit of the audience, really, Luke. So I like to kind of ask what an average week might look like. But if you can cast your memory back when you were a first team analyst then. So what would an average kind of week look like for you then? And then we'll kind of compare that to what you're doing now in the different role.
Well, it's funny. So when you sent the questions and asking about Brentford getting to the Premier League, that was pretty much the first time that I've looked back and reflected on how we did get to the Premier League. And you touched on the playoff victory against Swansea, but actually that was we'd got to the playoff final the year before as well and lost to Fulham. And I look back and I think it was something like 109 games we played in those 2 seasons. Wow. And obviously that was right in the middle of the pandemic, and we had a 10-day break between the 2 seasons. So in terms of a week, I mean, we were playing every 3 to 4 days. So it was literally like it was relentless. It was an absolute slog. So yeah, you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, and everything in terms of a schedule is around the match day. So if you play on the Saturday and you're playing again on the Tuesday, you're in on the Sunday, you're debriefing, you're having a first look at Tuesday's opponent with the coaching staff, and then a Monday would be presentation to the players. Again, a real light day for the players because they've got another game the next day. So it's either you're on a coach traveling to an away game, or you're just home early-ish, ready and preparing for Saturday night. Tuesday night, sorry. And then Wednesday would be day off after the game. Thursday, you're back in debriefing, first look at Saturday's opponent. Friday would then be looking at Saturday's opponent for the players. Yeah, it's relentless. There's barely any time on the grass for the coaches to get any sort of information in, so they rely quite heavily on the analysis perspective, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of it, and rightly so, like is kind of weighted towards the opposition a lot of the times, and I think that probably comes with the nature of not having, you literally don't have time to do everything that you probably want to do. So I think, the points are made by obviously winning games, and so that's why a lot of the focus does tend to be on the opposition. So that just for the people listening, obviously, as you can see, 109 games in 2 seasons, it is just one big blur, really. So it is a lot of work. Normally you'd probably get maybe more than a 10-day break, but
Yeah.
you've got the playoffs and everything that you had. So that kind of made it even worse. So how does that kind of look in terms of what you do now? So are you there on match day as more of a different role, or you're not there? Like, how does your week look now?
Yeah, no. So no, I'm not there on match days anymore. Yeah, a little bit more sort of hybrid in terms of being in at the training ground and working from home. So yeah, in terms of how this role came about as well, we haven't really touched on that, but yeah, so got a young family now, which obviously you hear a lot of, and you hear about the hours that are required in analysis and what's the next step. And for me, it was when my wife and I found out that we were pregnant and we got twin boys. It was okay. How can I almost take a step back from being in a hotel every other Friday night? How can I formulate something that would allow me to be good in work and also good at home, and being a good dad and being good around the family. So actually back in 2019, I think it was, when we found out we were pregnant, I sort of put this role together and almost proposed it to Phil at the time. And it sort of sat on ice a little bit for a couple of seasons and then came to fruition. Last season was the first year in this role. So that's sort of how it came about. And so a structure of that now is it's almost Monday to Friday, to be totally honest with you. And it's like I say, in at the training ground when I need to be, still try and get in at the beginning of the week to be involved in some of the meetings, have a clear understanding of what Thomas and the coaches are trying to implement and get across, so that I can, in my role now, still try and influence that and have some influence on what they're trying to achieve, really. So that's where I'm at currently.
So in other words, you've got a cushy little Monday to Friday 9 till 5 there, Luke, which is you probably deserve that, to be fair. So well
all right.
So again, it just goes back to that progression and kind of the role was there. So you said you kind of pitched that role to them, and it was kind of, there was definitely a need for that, and you're obviously playing, and I think it probably obviously helps that you've done all them years as an analyst, and you've dealt with data and technology and software, so you've obviously got a strong knowledge of that, and then be able to kind of make the decisions that matter now in the role that you're at is obviously very useful to the club. So no, that's really interesting. So I mean, what I'll kind of ask you now then, Luke, really is, and I kind of ask this to all the guests that I have on, is just kind of advice, really, in terms of if someone's watching this now, maybe they're at university and, a career in sports analysis is something that they want to kind of go towards. What would you say to those kind of people, Luke?
I think I don't think much has changed from when I first got into it. So it is around trying to get out, get hands-on experience. It doesn't matter what level, what sport you're in. I think just offer to help out where you can at any sort of level. And then I think there's another aspect of it now that probably wasn't around so much when I was breaking through, and I saw you spoke to Liam Henshaw about this as well. But like the use of social media and getting
Yeah,
a portfolio of work together, and I think you've seen over the last couple of seasons more and more people that have done that are carving careers out for themselves. So that's also an opportunity for people now that wasn't necessarily there before. And I think probably the final thing is hard work. Like be prepared. If you want to be an analyst, you've got to be prepared to work hard. It's not glitz and glam. It's long hours. You're up till gone midnight coding games, getting debriefs ready for the next morning when other players and staff are sleeping on the way back from away games. You're there in front of the laptop preparing the next presentation. So yeah, it is really hard work, and you need to be prepared for that as well.
yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that you touched on the like the portfolio of works. Obviously, I do kind of speak about that a lot. So just for those listening, I'm not talking absolute rubbish when I say that. Obviously, other people like yourself, Luke, they kind of attest to that being useful. That is, it definitely is. And as you said, there's people that have gone from doing that simply from starting and posting things on Twitter to actually getting full-time employment within football clubs or any other kind of sports as well. So definitely do that if you are looking to kind of forge a career. So okay, so that's really interesting, and kind of you touched on see the chat with Liam in terms of the data, because obviously Liam kind of is one of them that posts online and stuff, and he's kind of got in the data visualization and the analytics kind of niche. So how has that kind of changed over the years for you then, Luke? Like, let's say when you started, were you? I mean, to be honest, if you'd have told me asked me what Tableau was, I mean, I wouldn't have even had a clue. So how has that kind of developed over the years? Were you much into data right from the start, or have you just kind of learned along your career, really?
No, I think exactly the same as you, to be honest with you. So yeah, you were reporting, you were doing post-match reports, you were doing pre-match reports, and it was quite manual. It was Excel, and you were writing formulas in Excel to try and automate as much of it as you possibly could. So in terms of, yeah, I think we were trying to do the same thing as what's happening now, but I mean, Python's obviously been around for years, and it just wasn't on my radar at the time. Yeah, you just find new processes, right, to speed up that, automate as much as you possibly can. And yeah, like the guys in the analysis office now are all using Tableau. Yeah, I think that's probably where so there's not a huge necessity for the guys to have like Python skills or R skills, because we do utilize smart odds quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've started learning Python the last 12 months, so sort of trying to get up to speed on that side of things.
Mm.
But yeah, it's just trying to keep up to date, right, and trying to keep on top of everything that's coming out to improve those processes.
Well, that's what your job is then, I suppose, isn't it, Luke? Like that's what you've got to do, keep on top of them. And if there's something that's new and interesting, then you check it out and bring it to the forefront of the club. And if that's gonna benefit them. So one other point I did actually obviously sent over because I wanted to speak about, Luke. I can't find it actually because it's been a while. So I remember you posted a while back in terms of like the analyst community as a whole, and like there's no union or anything like that. So just kind of as an overall, because a lot gets said about internships and unpaid work and the amount of hours and stuff. So what's your overall opinion on that? And what sparked that post? And I wish I could find it. I just couldn't. It wouldn't go back long enough. So just like
I'll send it to you.
yeah. So kind of what were you thinking when you put that out, and kind of what are your thoughts on the whole like sort of industry of analysis? Really, it's a very
Yeah,
big question, but
yeah, I think something like that is needed. I think people have tried to do it in the past, and I've probably just added my name to that list now of people that have tried and failed to do it. But essentially, yeah, it's everything you've outlined there. It was around trying to create a community and network for people that were trying to get into the industry, to give them access to people that have been in the industry and are in the industry to gain some advice and some guidance on what they need to do to carve themselves out a successful career. It wanted it to be a place where people could share information. So like what people are doing on Twitter, almost bring it to a bespoke custom analysis platform. I wanted it to be like, I wanted to give some support to analysts that are in the firing line in first team level. So yeah, I've spoken a number of analysts over the years that a new manager's come in and brought his own man now, and they're left in the lurch or they're out of the club completely, and then it's okay, so where do I turn from here? And there's just no support for that situation or that scenario. So I think every other department's got, it doesn't necessarily have to be a union, but somebody that they can turn to with some legal experience as a bit of protection, really. And then almost this is a little bit union-y, but like the rights in terms of working hours, like analysts up and down the country will tell you that they do 50, 60, 70-hour weeks, and at the end of the day, that's not really acceptable. And I think football gets away with it because it is football, and I think that shouldn't really be happening. So it was, I just wanted to try and give people a bit of support in that area, really, as well. And it came at a time where I'd been doing those 50, 60-hour weeks myself, and then I was going into a 40-hour week, and I felt, I've got a bit more spare time here, like maybe I can get something up and running. And suddenly this role has become just as busy, to be honest with you. And then young family on top of that, it's been tricky.
No, the whole concept though, like you mentioned, just having a community, like say when you first become an analyst, you kind of you are in the deep end. The first time you go in the changing room at half time, it's it's an experience in itself. Like you said, someone, a new manager comes in, brings another guy in, you don't really know where, but if there's someone that you can, or a group of people that you can reach it, kind of lean into and kind of say, has this happened to you before? Like, how should I deal with this, etc. And I think, and sharing ideas, and it's a grey area, because I know some clubs are obviously very secretive and sharing best practices and the kind of things that they do, but I think football is more secretive than other sports. And from what I've kind of, I think in say rugby, they're more open just to say, look, this is how we do it. You can, if you want to learn from it, then great. But there does seem to be that, and I know why. Obviously, there's a lot of money involved, and it's very high pressure. But it does seem that football is a bit more secretive than other sports.
I agree with you, but I bet you 99% of everybody up and down the country are doing real similar things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like when you chat on a match day, if you go, Are you planning on doing this against us? Yeah, we are. Yeah, like everybody knows what everybody's going to do. So it's, of course, there are some situations where there's some small gains to be had, but ultimately, I'd say a lot of the time people are completing a lot of the same processes.
Yeah, definitely. No, the whole idea. Yeah, no, 100%. That the whole idea of the community, as you described there, Luke, I think is a great idea. So if anyone is interested to kind of chip in, or just leave a comment below if if you think that would be a good idea. But just kind of moving on then. Obviously, you're in kind of a senior role now, and obviously when you headed up the analysis department, were you involved in hiring staff then? I presume, Luke. Did you do interviews and things like that? So one question I do have on that is, obviously I've got some videos on my channel in terms of tips for kind of CVs and cover letters and stuff. But in terms of a lot of people kind of get in touch and say, I've got this interview, what can I expect? Or have you got any advice for what I should do in the interview? Should I take any work with me? What can you kind of say from your experiences in terms of interviewing people?
Yeah, so a bit of an insight into my head when I was doing interviews would be that I would almost, well, not almost, I would tailor it around the role that was being advertised. So I wouldn't say that one interview process was exactly the same as another one. It was all tweaked to the position that people were applying for. But what I like to try and do was I like to try and create two situations. So one situation would be high pressure, no time to complete, try and put the candidate under pressure and see how they reacted, because ultimately you're required to work under time constraints in a role in analysis. I like to try and do to see how they reacted to a stressful situation. And then the other one would be the complete reverse of that. So when it was question time, I'd make the situation as completely relaxed as I possibly could. And then it's around getting to understand them as a person and what's their personality like. And I guess that ties into the culture at the club. And have you got a beeper on your? Have you got the functionality to do a beeper? Because I'm going to swear. Thomas has obviously put in the press a few times around like a no dickhead policy, and it's around exactly that. It's not just players, but it's staff as well, and creating that whole environment and culture and getting the right person in. But in terms of people applying themselves, I think it's around trying to stand out. So create a CV that is a little bit different. That's always stood out to me. I think people that have also stood out to me are people that have taken the time to do a little bit of research about the club and about the analysis department and about the people within it as well. So just try and almost tailor it and customize it to the role that you're going for as well.
Yeah. And you said that obviously it's about getting the right person, because what you've described earlier, obviously you're going to be spending a lot of time, if it's part of the analysis department, you're going to be spending 60 hours or whatever it is a week with this person. And I like the idea you said there, you have that high pressure thing to kind of test them in that regard, but then kind of dumb it down and kind of try and make them at ease and see what let their personality come across as well. But yeah, because I remember, see, this is going back a long time, but I remember I had an interview at a club. I'm not going to say which one it was, but they sprung like a last minute, like just in the interview, here's a task. And it does get the heart racing a bit. Like you've got 15 minutes to do that, and it's So I think if you've got interviews, kind of be prepared to kind of be given things like that, and just kind of, and like I say, as much as you will be nervous, because I think that is a thing. It is hard for some people to kind of show their personality in an interview, because it's kind of a high pressure situation for them regardless, because obviously they're very nervous of the job. But if you can relax it, let your personality come across, and that's going to play a big part in actually getting the job, really. So one thing I do like to ask Luke, the guest that I have on, is do you have any, and you may or may not have any recommendations for any books, podcasts? And this doesn't have to be sports analysis related. It can be anything you just want to give a shout out to, really.
So I when I'm driving, I pretty much always stick a podcast on. So, and that's a little bit dependent on what mood I'm in. I really enjoy the High Performance podcast with Jake Humphrey and Damien Hughes. That's always a go-to. I think, get a lot of nuggets from that. Listen to a couple of the Stephen Bartlett ones. Is it Diary of a CEO? They're quite good as well. And then if I'm after a bit of comedy, it's the Peter Crouch. Peter Crouch podcast. And then books. I've just finished. This is a bit geeky, actually. Nothing to do with sport at all. But the Price of Money by Rob Dix. It's a little bit on the economics, and it's probably quite apt to the world we're living at the moment around inflation and everything like that. I found that quite interesting.
Cool. I'll link it below. And the Peter Crouch podcast, if you haven't seen it already, I do recommend Under the Cosh podcast as well, which is that's got some funny guests on there as well. So one thing I've actually missed, Luke, if you're right to kind of go back, so in terms of, obviously we mentioned the heavy kind of reliance on stats and data and things like that, and just kind of obviously it's more in the forefront now because it's being mentioned on the likes of Match of the Day and things like that. So expected goals and things like that. So when we spoke about buying undervalued players, in terms of if some players are kind of overachieving and that's not sustainable, and they'll be kind of overpriced for that period of time, and then some players might well be underpriced because they've scored less goals, but they're just going through a bit of an unfortunate run, which in the kind of logical sense will eventually end, and they'll be able to get better and obviously then be worth more. So because it's obviously mentioned a lot, and you see, like I said, on Match of the Day, it'll say the score was 3-0 but the expected goal score was 2-1 or whatever, and some people just don't know what it is. So it's just kind of curious to kind of what that is, and is it are there different models for that as well, in terms of, again, it's like you said, there's lots of kind of research you can do on this, but in terms of, are they taking into account the position of the goalkeeper, the position of the defenders and things like that? So there's a lot of different variables in it.
I think lots of different people and companies have got their own variations of expected goals models. So, and like you touched on there, they bring in a multiple of different variables within that. So we use Optadata, but obviously fully aware of people using the StatsBomb stuff, and they're talking about like height of the ball when they're shooting, like you touched on, goalkeeper position, number of defenders between the ball and the goalkeeper as well, and whether it's blocking their vision. So they're being developed and being added to very regularly, and being improved as well.
I suppose it's just another way of the development of the whole all the data you're getting is getting more accurate, and you're learning more from all this extra data, really. So, well, that's really interesting. So, is there anything, Luke, that, again, I've gone through my main questions, really, Luke? Is there anything you want to add? Anything you maybe want to give a shout out to? Like I say, maybe I've missed something out for you personally.
Let me have a quick look. I did put a few notes down. I think we pretty much covered everything, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I'd say the main ones, like I say, I like to get some good advice for kind of students that are looking to kind of follow in your steps, and the progression thing was a big thing to kind of touch on, and you moving through the ranks of being an analyst, heading up the department, and now you've created that role for yourself. So really interesting for other people to kind of learn from and kind of potentially follow in a similar path, really. But if anyone listening has any questions for myself or Luke, you can leave a comment below the video. And yeah, we'll kind of get back to you if we can, if the question is good enough. So, Luke, I appreciate your time. Thanks again. All the best for this season. Obviously, I'll be watching a lot of the games and seeing the highlights and stuff. So, yeah, wish you all the best for the season. Thanks again, and we shall catch up soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Enjoyed that.
Nice one. Cheers, Luke. Take care.
Bye.